everyone. Again, welcome. Real quick, I just want to give a heads up that Carnell and I will be asking questions, one question at a time, just so that you're all aware. Carnell's going to start off with the first question, and I'll go. And for all the panelists, we may ask follow-up questions specific to those individual questions. So Carnell, the stage is yours. Go ahead. Thank you.
All right, everyone. Thank you for everyone for joining and getting involved and taking this step to talk about this topic that is somewhat been stigmatized over generations, and now is the time to make this more of a accessible issue. I know that me personally, I did not always have the most enlightened perspective on mental health. I never really understood what it was, and so to have an open mind or even curiosity about this topic is a wonderful thing. What is the relationship between the mind, the body, and the brain? And how does this connect with mental health? Because when you talk about mental health, you have a set of assumptions, and there may be some misunderstandings as far as what that actually means. So who wants to take the floor on that question?
I think that the mind and the body, well, I know the mind and the body are very interconnected, and they're one in a sense. I've been reading a book recently called How to Do the Work, and it talks about how mental illness sometimes shows up as physical illness, or how physical illness can also impact your mental mind state. So the research has shown that these are interconnected systems, and the sound mind equals a sound body, and vice versa.
I think what Dr. Isaac said is very powerful. I often listen to like inspirational speakers and read a lot of books that deals with the mind. And one of the things that I recently heard is that we tend to value things that cost us money, and we tend not to value things that don't cost us money. Our mind doesn't cost us anything, but it's possibly the most valuable asset that we have. One of the, being a Christian, one of the scriptures that actually comes to my mind frequently is that, I think it's Proverbs 4:23 that says that be careful how you think, because your life is shaped by your thoughts. So we don't value our mind because society, we don't talk about the mind and being careful of what you feed your mind with. But when people realize that whatever you put into your mind will determine your reality, I think we will be more cautious of the types of music that we listen to, the types of movies that we watch, because those things affect our reality and what eventually happens in our lives.
That's powerful. And so I'm curious. I'm trying to be very cautious because of time, but like both of you have made some great points. And I keep hearing the whole illness from Dr. Isaac, and then Deepo brought up the things that we don't value. So I'm even thinking, like, could it be avoidable? For example, are schools responsible for the reasons why there's mental health? Because they don't teach how to take care of your mind. It's, they teach you, they put things in.
Even though schools don't teach about that, I think that parents do have that responsibility to educate their children about what the school system don't teach them. So for example, personally, I teach my children about God because they don't teach them in school. I teach my children about money because they don't teach them in school. And I teach my children about identity, who they are. It becomes very difficult for someone to try to put you into peer pressure and get you to do things that is contrary to who you are as a person.
Dr. Ike?
Because it's a very dear point to my heart for numerous reasons. Through people to do things and love things and buy things, right? And that does a lot with tapping into people's mind. That does a lot with tapping into the way they think, into their thought process. That does a lot into tapping into their mind share. What part of your brain thinks more about food, and one part of your brain thinks more about clothes. And we have to literally break down that to understand different customers all around the world. because we do these projects all around the world, right? So we have to simplify the way the human brain is. The first thing I like to throw out about mental health is I actually don't like when we use the word illness and health towards it. Because not only is it an issue, it's an issue just like a lot of other issues in life that we don't tag along the word illness and health. When we tag along the word illness and health, we now strengthen the stigma of I don't want that, or I don't want to be around that, right? There's different addictions and issues in people's lives that we don't tag along illnesses with, because maybe they're feeling all right, or maybe they're not showing certain things. They're gonna be like, what? Are you crazy? So my whole thing is, when you look at that pressure already, up until you're cultivating years of like 25 years old, a seed has blossomed to an oak tree with the way you think, the things you believe, the way your mind curves, the way you make decisions, the way you educate or miseducate yourself, the things you allow yourself to absorb versus things you push away, which is why a lot of Africans sometimes would rather not want to learn about something and not know anything about it than learn the truth about it.
I want to go to question 2. So research shows, and this is going to be a very powerful question. Research, don't worry, I'm not the one who came up with the questions. It was Sunny and her team. But research shows that white teens, male and female, tend to have a more positive outlook towards mental health, right? And a positive mental health. And they're more knowledgeable about their mental health than young men and women of color. So, and this is obviously from statistics. What can we do to change this? What are some things that can be done to shift this, where there's more awareness, not only in the area of mental health, but also that there's a positive outlook towards mental health for, I would say, young people of color, but just people of color generally?
That's a great question you asked. And I just wanted to say thank you for that question, because it goes back to the stigma, right? In our community, I'm Ghanaian, so a lot of everything the brother just said holds true for Ghanaians as well. But
Ghanaians too.
Right. And anyone from who has African ancestry and cultures related to that, we view mental health from a space of stigmatization, and it has been used against us because of systemic issues that exist, particularly in the Western world. The majority communities leverage mental health as a way to gain a leg up. In our communities, mental health is something that is used to discriminate against you and keep you down. If you go to PWIs, you'll find that many of the students on those campuses have mental health issues, and they're medicated, and they get accommodation letters to their professors who basically say, this student needs 2 extra hours to take this test because they have a mental issue. The same student that might be at a Black college, one would have never even been coached on how to handle that mental challenge, and it would limit them in some way. Whereas their white counterpart will leverage that and still go on to go be a managing director at some multi-million-dollar corporation. And I think it just goes back to how we view these things, but also how these things have been used against us. Our own mental health has been weaponized in a way where if you have a mental challenge and the police are called, you're likely to die if you're Black. Versus if you're white and the police are called and you have a mental issue, they're likely to get you the support that you need. These are just facts. These are things that are real. In our cultures, specifically in African cultures, we continuously perpetuate these stigmas around mental health by not having conversations, by not talking about it. We know we have people in our family that have certain mental illnesses. We don't talk about it. Oh, Uncle so-and-so, he's not correct. It's like, well, what does that mean? Let's have a conversation about what the person is dealing with. Let's get them the treatment and normalize that this is just a part of people. Everyone has some type of mental defect, and if you understand it early, you can harness it in a way where you can still be successful, and it's not a handicap. But in our community, we look at these things as handicaps, and then society in a whole uses it against us.
Excellent. Thank you so much. In the chat, right? All right, so let me just take a little pause and just share. Someone said great networking. Eric, thank you so much for being part of the community today. Africans for Mental Health shared, true, we have to break down patriarchy as it pits genders against one another and purports a particular role for each gender. For example, men are socialized to go to work while women are socialized to take care of the home. So these are some things, like they're giving practical ways to even kind of hopefully minimize those issues. Wayne says, I respect Ike's perspective. However, the use of illness is the distinguishing definition to alert the need to redress the person to a more healthy, functional disposition. The work has to be in the educating of the masses and the use of the media to, to remove the stigma. I appreciate that. I had to wrestle with the whole illness part because I was, I had some dysfunctions growing up, my family background, divorce, and I was told I had attention deficit disorder, which is a whole different conversation, but like I was considered someone who was unhealthy, who has an illness, who needs help, but really I just needed people to listen, care, empathize, and just say, I hear you, and mean it, and love me. So yeah, great point. So okay, let me just go to question number 3. Question number 3, Cardinal, go ahead.
Right, yes. So social media and technology has been known to intensify feelings of isolation and loneliness and levels of stress that often could be the cause of suicide. So what can be done to mitigate these risks of social media? And not just not just in the context of stress and isolation and loneliness, but also mental health as far as the human element of it, right? The social element of social media. How can we still be social and be human and be self-aware and manage ourselves while also mitigating these effects?
Yeah. So I think one of the ways to address that is really for a person to understand who they are as a person. The biggest challenge we see today is that a lot of people are putting on a persona of who they are not on social media. So if you don't know who you are, your identity, what you've been called to do, your passion, your purpose, that purpose is very key. Then you start comparing yourself with someone who appears to be successful. And if we kind of look back at social media, a lot of things that we see on social media is not real. All right. A lot of what people do out there is not real. I happen to know because I see certain people portraying a certain lifestyle, and I'm thinking to myself, I know you. That's not who you are, but the rest of the world doesn't know that.
Right.
So someone who's not secured in their identity or who does not know what their purpose in life is, they see something like that in their mind, they're not making any progress. They're not successful because so-and-so is doing this. And we're talking about being real. I got caught up, or at least I started to get caught up in that mentality because a lot of my college friends that we graduated, highly successful. I mean, I thought I was doing pretty well, right? Until I start seeing what other people are doing. I'm like, man, like, what am I doing with my life? Until one day I just made up my mind, like, look, what makes me happy is pursuing my purpose. So we can try to fix all the things externally, but individually, if we don't come to the point where we understand who we are, what our purpose is, then we'll continue to get sucked into all this, what's going on social media, trying to keep up with the Joneses on social media. So I think the key underlying factor is understanding your purpose and pursuing your purpose so you don't get distracted by what other people are doing.
Deepo, can I ask a question in tandem with that? Because you are an entrepreneur. So entrepreneurs of color, obviously, because of systematic challenges, have to work double, triple as harder, right? And being that we're in a digital world, like, how do we navigate that? Or how does one as an entrepreneur navigate the authentic self, knowing like maybe you're not going to get you're gonna move. You're gonna move in the right timing, in God's timing. But at the same time, like, there are people who are ahead of you, resource-wise, opportunity-wise, and so you're having people who are like, you know what, I need to kind of embellish, otherwise I'm not gonna move ahead.
But you gotta fake it till you make it. Look at the word social media. It comes from the word social medium. Social mediums have been around forever. Women coming together, having dinner parties, Tupperware parties. That was one of their social mediums. People coming together in the church groups. Those were social media back then. In those eras, people were fake as well back then. So the problem today is that now the access, there's so many different platforms and there's so much instantaneous access compared to before. Like before, you had to drive out to church and have the church meeting. Today, you can sit down in one place and access millions of people, millions of opinions about you, millions of opinions about that person, millions of people watching what you're doing, millions of people grading and judging your picture, all that stuff, right? Compared to before, you had to make your picture, go get your picture printed out and show people to judge it, right? So now, because of this instantaneousness, that's why it's actually much more rampant and dangerous today. Social media platforms have done a great job in the world, but also have a double-edged sword. They've helped a lot of entrepreneurs sell their dream, create their dream, take care of their kids, take care of their homes, make their companies eventually go public and live out their, things that they could not do. On the bad side, because of the instantaneousness and the large, diverse amount of opinions, judgments, characters, people that you don't know, 80,000 of them following you and calling you your friend, but they're not really your friends, gradually now start making you feel like your friends think this way about you.
If you think about it, I'm not going to make any moral judgments about these companies. Like you said, it's a double-edged sword. It's neutral. It's like any sort of technology. But if you think about it, in my opinion, social media is two things. It's a spiritual experience, but a commercial product. What that means is this is everyone's life. This is your life. We all have our daily lives and ideas and beliefs and lifestyles that we're putting on display.
And what the motivation is for these platforms from a capitalist perspective. I think that's really important. I spent the past 10 years on college campuses teaching business students. And the thing that I realized the most with Gen Z and millennials is that they are struggling to exist in two worlds: the physical world that you and I all know and the virtual world. And because of when I was born and how I was raised, I'm very comfortable in the physical world and I'm not as attached to the virtual world. But what I found is that many of my students are more comfortable in the virtual world than they are in the physical world. And their identity is developed based on the virtual world. And we understand how challenged that is. And that leads to a lot of the mental issues that we see, because who they are is based on how they appear and how they exist in the virtual realm, and almost not even connected to who they are face to face, because it just does not matter. So a student can be sitting at a dinner, but unless they're engaging with the followers in this virtual medium, they're not at dinner. Versus I can go and sit at dinner and just have dinner and eat and not think about what's happening there. So I'm able to disassociate those two worlds. But I find that younger people struggle with that disassociation, and it influences their mental mind state.
I think this is important to note. Gen Zers are undervalued and underestimated. That's part of the mental health issue. And then you also look at intersectionality being Black, then even for women, young women of color, that's even they're undervalued and underestimated. For those who are here today who are making intentional decisions to grow and to learn how to deal with mental health from this, I want to celebrate them. In fact, most Gen Zers, as much as we want to, I don't want to say many people criticize them, they're getting help more than millennials and they're asking for help more than we have. We think as a millennial, we think we knew it all.
You don't always walk out of a session feeling good. You don't walk out of a session feeling like you just got out of a mental massage and you're just like, walking around with a halo. It's like, no, sometimes like after the sessions, there was some things that I had to wrestle with on the inside because it was just uncomfortable. And I think the therapist, that's their job, is to take your situation and like reflect it back so that you can actually sit with it and evaluate it so that you can then deal with it yourself, and I think a lot of times there were some sessions where that I was not productive because I did not come prepared. And what I mean by prepared is I think the best thing that you can do, even if you have a therapist or not, in general, is just having a journal, right? Because think about it like this. Like when someone asks you, how are you doing? First thing, the blanket answer is good, I'm doing fine, blah, blah, blah. But if you're talking to somebody who's, you're more invested with and you have a connection with, or you're more interested in, you may answer it more authentically. And if you are going through mental issues,
found myself growing, and even from Carnell as a Gen Zer, I find myself learning from you too. And the attendance, I just want to share something that I think very briefly is very important. Many of us have been to events like these, or some of us, it's the first time we've been to an event like this. Do not, and I'm being cautious because I don't want to come off judgmental or make assumptions, but for all of us, including myself, that this doesn't end up a motivational event where we're just getting hype. Find one thing that we can take from this event and take action on it. We should be pursuing transformation, and transformation moves through action.